to be able to accept the fact that loss is part of living. And we lull ourselves into thinking that maybe we're in a sweet spot right now in our life and it's going to continue forever.
Yeah.
Well, no, nothing lasts forever. The pain doesn't last forever and the joy doesn't last forever. But understanding that that's just the cost of being alive.
And there will be joy again.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you have to let yourself. So one of the things that helped me after Kirby's death was remembering that I could still experience joy. And at that time, 3 of our grandchildren were little ones.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Andreea Park.
And I'm Alexa Dumitru.
And this is Alive Again podcast. Is a podcast where attorneys and other professionals meet to discuss real life challenges and the decisions that shaped our journeys. Today we have with us a special guest, very close to my heart, Virginia Brown, Ginny. Ginny is a licensed clinical social worker who has a small practice in her home. She and her husband George have raised 4 children in Westtown, New York, about 75 miles northwest of New York City. I met Ginny at our Three Tomatoes publishing company, and her book is absolutely inspiring for people. She wrote it co-authored with her daughter Jean. It's called The Sweet Life: How We Lived After Kirby Died. Thank you, Ginny, for being here with us today. Such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, as I mentioned, we met at the Three Tomatoes. We're both authors. Your story and your journey really stands out. So we're over 50 authors in the Three Tomatoes. Your journey is absolutely incredible because losing a child is, as a mother, is the worst thing that I think can happen to anybody. And I would like to ask you, how did you get to write this?
Well, I didn't write it quickly. My professional career, I've been a parenting educator most of my professional career, and then worked as a private counselor since the early days. So I've often shared stories of my life, and someone asked me one time, what do you really do? And I said, well, part of what I do is I bleed in public. But I learned that you can share your pain, but you don't share your hemorrhaging. So there has to be an element of peace. There has to be an element of healing within your own pain before you can share that with others to maybe try to help them get through whatever it is they're dealing with. So it took us a while to write this book. It wasn't quick. Kirby died in 2009. The trial for the man who was responsible for her death took place in most of the year of 2011. I wound up leaving paid employment in 2013. And then, the family had begun a not-for-profit to educate people about the dangers of self-help, since that was how my daughter lost her life, was in a self-help event. I probably began writing in maybe 2017, 18, and then the book was published in 2020, and the audio version was released in 21. So it was a long journey. It was a long journey. And once I found out that my younger daughter, Jean, wanted to write about what had happened, I was really grateful because she's a really good writer. So I thought, okay, so this could be good. This could be good. Because a lot of the writing I had done before that was more like, talks and workshops and curriculums and things like that. So I had never written a book.
Yeah.
Coming from experience between the two of us, mother-daughter, I think it's so important going through something together to speak about it together. And I think it offers such a good perspective of the different generations and the different points of view that not only does your perspective help, it helps two people in a scenario. And I think that's so important.
It was really great for me because I got to see pieces of Jean that she hadn't necessarily really revealed to me yet. And then to be able to really process it and talk about it together was wonderful.
Yeah.
That was wonderful.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you have a non-for-profit. And I would like you to mention the courses and everything that you're doing, because I know that I've done the Seek Safety registration. Right after I met you, the next day I went online and I did everything that needed to be done, and I have that logo on my website.
I know you do.
And please share with our listeners how all the coaches can get that.
So our website is seeksafely.org, and we created this not-for-profit after Kirby's death, partially to bring meaning to her death. She never should have died. You don't go to a self-help event to lose your life. You go to a self-help event to augment your life and to make things even better for yourself. And that's what Kirby was seeking. So we knew what had happened was really wrong, and we wanted to address this injustice and to help people understand that seeking is a great thing. It's part of the human spirit, to seek and to want to be better and to want to learn and want to be more. But we really need to be careful about who we're listening to, what we're choosing to believe, and where we're going, where we're spending our time and our money. So we, as a family, had decided on an organization that would be trying to educate people about the potential advantages and disadvantages in the self-help world, and also to empower the seeker to be really discerning about where they're going and what they're believing, and at the same time try to impact the industry by asking people who are in this self-help space to practice in a safe and ethical manner. And that's where we came up with the Seek Safely Promise, which outlines for people, this is how you need to practice if you're going to be in this space, and this is what your consumers should expect. So Seek Safely is not there to put the good housekeeping on anybody, but it's to give practitioners the opportunity to say, this is who I am, this is how I'm going to practice, and then for your clients to be able to say, this is what I can expect from the person that I'm going to. So, we on our website, we have the Seek Safely Promise, and people can go on the website and sign the promise, and then it will be the list of people who have signed is also available on our site. So the site has a lot of information about self-help, about mind control tactics, about things that are potentially dangerous, guru literacy, trying to figure out who your guru is, and just to get people thinking in a critical way so that when you make this decision to go into a self-help venue or to a person or to a coach, you have an idea of what you're doing and where you're going, and maybe you've checked in with your own vulnerabilities so that you're not putting yourself in a potentially dangerous place.
Yeah, this industry can be so predatory.
Yes.
Because the people who need it the most are the
Yeah.
people who are in dire positions, who are looking, because it's not easy to ask for help. And that's why we started this podcast, because it's not easy to ask for help.
Right.
Most people who have gotten over that hurdle to ask for help are in positions needing it. And it can be so predatory. So I think it's so important to set a standard and a precedent.
And, when we started this, I was like amazed that no one was doing this. I kept thinking we will join with other people, but no one else was addressing this issue at all. It's been a long journey. But I think after 15 years, people are more willing to consider the fact that, there's good and there's bad here. And I also think it's a little bit like the Me Too movement. I think we've come to a point in history where people are now able to say, yeah, I was scammed. Okay. And I'm not just ashamed of that. I'm not just embarrassed. I'm not just angry, but I'm willing to speak out and address it. Now, in the last 2 years, we've been able to join with people in the larger industry so that this organization can get beyond our origin story and really focus on the industry, which was our intent all along.
Yeah, I was gonna say, now recently, especially on Netflix, there has been a lot of documentaries about organizations like this. A lot of them recently. And I think people are starting to wake up and say, who am I listening to?
Right.
It's scary.
Yeah, and just because someone is very charismatic and speaks with authority doesn't mean that they know what they're talking about or what they're saying is true.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it's super interesting if you look around, and I believe it started right before the pandemic. Most of the people that lost their jobs or didn't know what to do, they decided to become a coach. And there are so many coaches and people of exactly what you said, being charismatic and knowing how to speak doesn't make you a coach.
that's right. Or knowing how to market
Right.
doesn't make you a
Exactly.
coach.
Right. Knowing and it's hard to figure out how, because this is not an industry that is regulated in any way.
No.
We're trying to get some regulation in New York State. We have a bill that's actually been passed by the Senate and still has to come before the Assembly before it can go before. But we've been working on this since 2016. So it's been a long time. And I'm not a fan of regulation. I grew up in the 60s. I didn't even like seatbelts, really. So I'm not about everything being regulated, but we're a country that focuses on safety. And this is one industry that has no oversight at all.
Exactly.
So, when James Ray was convicted of negligent homicide, he didn't have a license to be taken away from him because he had no credentials and no licensing. So when he got out of prison, he was able to go back and do what he was doing before. So
Wow.
there's no ability to even encourage the person to go in a different direction, So that's part of the difficulty. And what we always say is lots of times people can have great expertise in a particular area, financial, nutrition, okay? And then when they get an audience and they get attention, they very often veer out of their lane and start giving psychological advice, start telling people how to handle relationships. I'm a clinical social worker. I don't give out nutrition information. I don't give out financial information to people. I'm going to stick with the psychological dynamics that I've studied and that I know and that I might be able to help people with to regulate their own emotions, but I'm not qualified to talk about those other things. But a lot of coaches, once they start gathering some following, they veer out of their lane, and that's when there's trouble.
So, forgive me if this question is too direct, but how, as a parent, do you see this person get out of prison and go straight back to what they were doing? You don't have to answer if it's not comfortable.
It was really hard, but you know what? I decided very early that I was not going to let James Ray take another victim in my family, myself or my other children. So I didn't want to follow him. I didn't want to troll him. I didn't really want to know what he was doing. Other people, told me. And at different points, we had to speak up. When he wanted to have his sentence vacated, of course, we went back to Arizona to speak to the judge to not let that happen. But I didn't want him to take up any space in my head. I didn't want him to take up any space in my emotional self, that I needed all my energy to deal with this incredible, crushing loss. I didn't have room for a whole lot of anger or vindictiveness. He was done. He did what he did, and she was gone. And my feelings about him were not going to bring her back.
Exactly.
And I told our children, actually going to her funeral, you cannot live with sadness and anger, because then he will take another victim in this family. That's just not acceptable.
Yeah. I think that's really, I mean, incredible. Because you see, I mean, so often, as you said, they take another victim in the family just because of anger and frustration, and
that's the power.
that's the power. Yeah.
And then to allow ourselves to use what happened to try to help other people, because I realized that not only was this the death of my daughter, who was an awesome, amazing person, but it was sudden, it was criminal, it was public. So there were a lot of layers here that most people don't have to deal with all at once. And I really felt like sharing what we had to live through and how we handled it could be helpful.
Yeah. And I know that you have 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
The other 2 children were not involved in the book, or they didn't want to participate, or it was too much for them?
We made the decision as a family to create the organization. My daughter, Kate, who was very close to her sister because they lived together in Mexico for a number of years, has 2 boys. And she said, Mom, I'm too angry to focus on this. I have to concentrate on my kids. And I said, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I want your input, but you don't have to participate in this in any way you want. Our son Bob was our board president and was very involved in the very beginning. And then after about 5 years, he said, Mom, my life is too complicated now. He has 3 kids. Right now, they're all teenagers, so their house is like total chaos. And I have to concentrate on the family. And I said, fine. And I had said to Jean, too, I don't want you to feel tied to this. We started something, it's going, we can find other people to help. But if other opportunities come along for you, you need to take them. So she is working, and she's doing her own podcast with our board president, Dr. Glenn Doyle, who's a trauma specialist in Chicago, and they do a podcast called Seek Safely Podcast. So she really likes it, and she's become kind of a self-help expert, because she's done so much reading and spoken to so many people who are in this space. So this is her choice and her choice alone. And even for me now, I've had to really step back because my husband has advanced Parkinson's and he needs me. He needs me to be here and to be home with him. So I don't have the same kind of time that I did, after 2013, where for a good 10 years, a lot of my time was poured into, trying to get this organization going, which is ridiculous because, I can speak, but I'm not a business person at all. And running an organization, no, that's not my skill set. And dealing with social media, absolutely not. I am not there. So, trying to find other people to fill those roles has been interesting. And this has been like an incredible journey of people that I have met. So, I say to my daughter, Kirby, you were always the person who were bringing people into my life because she was so social and everyone loved her. And she was always bringing people home, When she was a senior in high school, she brought a person home. She brought a local kid who was living in a barn and said, can he live here, Mom? I said, sure, of course. Yeah, of course.
What's another kid?
We've brought home animals. We've just graduated to a new level here, So, Kirby has always brought people into my life, and she continues to do that.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned that people kind of branch out from what they know to something else, but people like us who went through an experience and know it, as you mentioned about your daughter with the podcast, of course you become knowledgeable in self-help when you coach yourself every moment from survival to peace, inner peace, and from that to helping other people. That is through knowledge, through experience.
And that's what becomes transformative for our pain. When we can find some meaning, we'll never understand everything in this life. We're living in a broken world. And so we're never going to get it all. I personally believe in another world that we're going to, where we're supposed to get glorified bodies. I like that idea. But we're moving towards a place of perfection. Perfection is not here. It's not here. And there's pain behind every door. Everyone's pain is just different, but we're not alone. We're not alone in the struggles of life.
No, definitely not. And that's the reason why we have this podcast, and probably your daughter has her podcast, so we can speak about the pain for people that are feeling it but not speaking about it, to at least listen and realize they're not alone. And we all go through, like Viktor Frankl said, that we all have our own Auschwitz, just differently.
That's
We
right.
go through it differently. And some people speak about it, others don't, but we're not alone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as a Catholic, I'm a practicing Catholic, and this is a season of Lent, and we're coming into Easter. So the week before Easter is the Triduum, the Paschal Mystery. It's Passion, Death, and Resurrection. And I really believe that that is the cycle of life, that there's pain, there's death, and then there's an opportunity to go through it in order to be transformed by it. And that's the only way we're going to have a resurrection.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And I think that's the way life is, not necessarily religion-wise. We're Greek Orthodox, so
Yeah.
we're about the same. But I think all the religions at some point, they have the same teachings.
Well,
Because that is life.
that's right. I was just going to say, look at nature. I mean, it's the cycles of nature
Exactly.
that we're experiencing on an emotional level.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta trim the flowers so they grow bigger.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I was looking, we have a lot of trees here, and I was looking at the trees one day and was thinking, when the tree loses its leaves in the fall, it doesn't suffer because the tree knows that in the spring it's going to grow new leaves. But the human mind is making such a big deal about every little thing, and we create our suffering in such a way that this world became a world of suffering.
To be able to accept the fact that loss is part of living, and we lull ourselves into thinking that maybe we're in a sweet spot right now in our life and it's going to continue forever. Well, no, nothing lasts forever. The pain doesn't last forever and the joy doesn't last forever. But understanding that that's just the cost of being alive.
And there will be joy again.
That's right. That's right. And you have to let yourself. So one of the things that helped me after Kirby's death was remembering that I could still experience joy. And at that time, 3 of our grandchildren were little ones. And the joy of just having those children in our life. So on bad days in the beginning, you can see this, on bad days in the beginning,
Yes.
I would take out this picture to remind myself that's my little Lyle, my oldest grandchild, and that was in October of 2009, where,
Yeah.
we could pile the leaves together and jump in the leaves, and that smile on her face and on my face reminds me that, yeah, even in the middle of that searing pain of loss, you can still have joy.
There is joy. Yeah.
You can still have joy. And I share that with a lot of clients, who think that, you're in the middle of something that's horrendous. And it's not like deny it. No, you're going to feel it. But you have to remember, it's not forever. And life is a bigger picture than this piece of pain.
And when we were going through the bad parts of life,
Mhm.
we were always cracking jokes.
Mhm.
And it ruffled a few feathers along the
Mhm.
line.
Mhm.
It ruffled a few feathers, but why am I supposed to cry all the time? I can laugh about it.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not going to get any worse. Might as well crack a joke or two.
That's right.
There's no harm in making light of a bad situation.
That's right. And the ridiculousness of certain things,
Right. Right.
like right now with my husband, the loss of Kirby was horrific, but I am losing him an inch a day as he descends into this disease. So that journey of loss has become so continual. And yet, in the middle of that, there are things that happen that are hysterical. He experiences hallucinations. So the other night he said, "Well, that was interesting." I said, "What?" He said, "The donkey in the living room." And I was like, "Damn, I wish I had seen that." And he kind of realized that it was a hallucination, but he still saw it, right? But he still saw
And
it.
he really believed it.
And he believed it because the hallucinations are very, very real looking, And we've just been through like a crazy thing with medication and trying to track it down. And where is it? What post office is it? Is it getting delivered today? Is it getting delivered tomorrow? And you have to stop and say, this is just so ridiculous that I have to laugh at it.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no shame in that.
Yeah. No.
No, well, it's a total coping mechanism. One of the things in our family that we've always done, we went cross country with our kids a number of times and we were campers, tenters. So we were pretty rustic there. And we took them to most of the national parks. Now, our kids in their adulthood say, "Well, Mom, you taught us to be adventurers and travelers." And I would say, "Well, that was a cheap vacation. That's what we could afford." I didn't have this thought of turning you into grand adventurers. But when things would go wrong on the road, which happens all the time, if you've ever gone camping, there are always really terrible things that happen. But when campers get together, what do? They tell their disaster stories. They always tell the disaster stories, like the time the tornado blew the tent away, and you sit around the campfire with other people and you go like, "And we're still doing this? Why? Why are we still doing this?" And the kids would say, no matter what happened, they would say, "Gee, I wonder what kind of story Dad is going to spin this one into." Because no matter what happens, it can make a really great story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes, I don't know how tragic some stories are. When you tell the story later on, it's funny.
That's right. That's right. It's absolutely true. And to allow yourself see that humor and allow the humor to pick you up and give you some energy, because that's what happens when we're so sad. We're so depleted. We're so depleted of energy, and we have to move beyond it. Andreea, I have to tell you, I loved on your website the question about constructive escape.
Yeah.
What is your constructive escape? And so I was really thinking about that. What is my constructive escape? So I think my first escape is always nature and God and prayer and quiet, to just give myself quiet, do that deep breathing and get quiet inside so that I get out of that panicked place in my brain that's going to make me either go nuts or hide. You're either going to go one way or the other, So, to get to that place where maybe I can think a little bit better, to let myself notice beauty and create it, to find meaningful work so that I can make a difference, in serving other people or helping others. Those are the escapes that become your purpose in life.
Thank you for that. And talking about funny, I have a line in my book where I tell the story of what happened and I end the chapter, well, everything is temporary.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to sign my books that everything is temporary. And somebody told me, you can't do that. That is so sad.
But the bad is temporary as well as the great.
It's
Right?
the way that you look at it. You choose to look at it in a sad way.
Yeah. And then I changed it. I don't want to make people sad. It's funny. To me, it was funny from a funnier point of view that, yes, this will end eventually. Yeah.
But that I'm sure when you were working as a lawyer, what's happening in the moment is the biggest, most important, and nothing is bigger than what's happening right now.
Now.
And that's just not true. It's not true. It's a little slice of my time in my life, and it needs to be put in a larger perspective so I don't lose my mind over stuff that really is not that important.
Not at all. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all in our minds. We all create things with our minds.
Well, I love that, the whole concept of reframing whatever it is that's happening. I mean, that's a very basic therapeutic technique, helping people to look at things from a different perspective, a different point of view. When George and I were first married, he has 3 postgraduate degrees. So he just loved going to school. So he has a degree in psychoanalytic counseling. He has a degree in theology, and then he has a master's in social work. So by the time he was finishing the master's in social work, we had 3 children. And I said, this is it. Enough. Now it's just time for you to work. I'm trying to remember why I brought that up.
I think the reframing.
Yeah, we were talking about
The reframing. Good, thank you. So it's always good to be in a group because you get a whole brain, as a result. So yeah, the reframing. So he would come home that last year, he was working so hard. He's going to school full time. He's working. He's doing an internship. He was never home. So of course I have 3 young children. And as soon as daddy walks in the door, daddy, 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 they roll over him. And can we go to the park? And can we get a puppy? And can we get ice cream? And can we do this? And can we do that? And he would say yes to everything they asked. And I would say, he's a liar. We don't have the time or the resources to do these things, and I was so angry with him. And I remember praying about this. And what came to me was, he's not a liar. It's just that his heart is way bigger than his head. And that's who my husband is. His heart has always been bigger than his head. So the ability for time and resources has always been secondary to what he wants to give me, what he wants to give our children, what he wants to build in our life. And it was always, well, let's figure it out and try to make it happen. And a lot of times he would make it happen, But that, to me, was the most important reframing of that judgment that he was not being truthful. And, then the kids would be upset, and then I'd be angry with him, and I'd be left with the crying children while he was gone, And then when I was able to say to them, kids, that's just who your daddy is. He wants to give you everything. And his heart is just way bigger than his head.
The intention is that counts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right.
And now that we're approaching the end, there is a question that I ask every guest.
Okay.
What is one activity in your life that makes you feel more alive?
I think there's a lot of things. I think good work that makes a difference gives me a lot of energy and makes me feel really alive. I think letting myself see, experience, feel the beauty in the world around me, in nature, and in people is something that really lights me up. So we're very fortunate. We live in a very beautiful spot here in Orange County, New York. We're on a little lake, so we see the geese and the ducks and the swans and the animals outside. We're on a piece of property that's almost 2 acres, and it's beautiful. And we see the birds, and so letting yourself see that sunrise every morning, looking at the moon, following the cycles of the moon, and allowing yourself to be, I don't know, I always think of it as sort of like God just putting us on his lap and being in the rocking chair, and just being soothed and calmed and given this beautiful gift that, I say to people all the time, the sunrise and the sunset he does for us, but you have to let yourself see it so that you can appreciate it.
True. It's true that nature saved my soul. It's wonderful when you actually observe the beauty of nature.
That's right. That's right. And I think sometimes, too, the beauty of nature can bring us to the beauty of people when we get beyond judgment, when we get beyond preconceived notions of how everyone is supposed to be, and we just let ourselves be with someone and listen to them and hear them and, discover their beauty, their own individual beauty without any kind of judgment or preconceived ideas.
Because what we see in others is in us.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, really, to have this conversation with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, our listeners, for listening. And for more guests and discussions, please subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you. And let your listeners know that if they want to know more of our story, they can go to Amazon and get This Sweet Life, How We Lived After Kirby Died. And there's a whole section on grief that I specifically wrote to help people go through the grieving journey, because we're all grieving things in our life. And it's important for us to understand how to approach it in a way that's going to be healthy and not harmful.
I will definitely link the book, the Amazon book, to the podcast.
Thank you.
And your website.
Yes.
Your website will be there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.